Many religions, even monotheistic ones, teach absolute obedience to God. If God says something, no matter how extreme, you're duty bound to obey. But Judaism teaches another way. Now, to begin with, if you like these videos, then please like and subscribe and comment below. I welcome dialogue, including constructive criticism. Now, in this week's Torah portion, we find Genesis 6:9. These are the family histories of Noach. Noach was a righteous man, wholehearted in his generations, and Noach walked with God. Now let's unpack this. The first part says that Noach was wholehearted. Now, we find that there's actually a dispute among the rabbis in Midrash Tanchuma, an ancient Jewish Bible interpretation, talks about a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah. One said, okay, yeah, Noach was righteous, wholehearted in his generations. But if he had lived in the generation of Avraham, then he wouldn't have been so righteous compared to somebody like Avraham. But it's just that in his own generation, when you have the peoples before the flood and all of that, where there's wickedness and violence all around, compared to them, he was righteous. And he compares it to a barrel of persimmon oil. It's located in a place where there's a foul odor. Okay, there the persimmon oil overpowers the foul odor. And you say, yeah, it's nice. But you put the same barrel of persimmon oil just by itself, and its aroma is not so great. On the other hand, the other rabbi says, no, he was a righteous man, and he likens it to a bowl of rose oil in a place where there's a foul odor. If the rose oil overcomes the foul odor there, how much the more nice would rose oil smell by itself? So we see from this midrash, there are two ways to interpret that passage as to Noach being a righteous man. But let's continue in the verse. It says, and Noah walked with God. Maybe there's more that we could learn about Noah's character from this. The Midrash Tanchuma compares this with Avraham, our father. Well, of Avraham in Genesis 17:1, it says, walk before me and be wholehearted. So our sages compared this to a king who sent his son on a mission. And the son has to walk through mire and quicksand and all of this. And so the king walks with his son so as to lift him out of the mire and all of that, to keep him steady going. And since Noach lived in the generation before the flood of such wickedness and violence, God walks beside him to keep him righteous by lifting him up constantly so he doesn't get mixed up in the mire all around him. But of Avraham, it is said, walk before me and be wholehearted in Genesis 17:1. So our sages compare that with Noach and say, look, Avraham and our righteous forefathers, Avraham and Moshe and others, they would walk before God, making a space for the divine presence to follow. And so if you compare, Noach is told by God that he's going to destroy all of mankind. And Noach is silent. God tells Noach to build an ark. He builds the ark. God tells Noach to get in with his wife, his 3 sons, their wives, gather all the animals in, all of that. And Noach does exactly what God says every step of the way. And in the end, Noach saves himself, his immediate family, and the animals. Okay? But when God tells Avraham that he's going to destroy Sodom and Amorah, the cities of the around the Dead Sea, for their wickedness, what does Avraham do? He pleads with God. How far be it from the judge of all the earth that you're going to destroy the whole city and take 50 righteous people with it? How can the judge of all the earth do wrong? And God says, okay, if I find 50 righteous, then I won't destroy it. So Avraham says, what if there are 40 righteous? God says, okay, if there are 40 righteous, I won't. And Avraham continues pleading down to what if there are 10 righteous? And God says, okay, if I find 10 righteous, I won't destroy the city. In other words, when God says he's going to bring judgment on these cities for their wickedness, Avraham pleads with God. In other religions, this is considered blasphemous. But in Judaism, this is considered righteous behavior. It's called storming the gates of heaven. Well, Avraham says, how can the judge of all the earth do unrighteousness? And he tries his best to save these cities. And in the end, he saves Lot and his family. Okay, or Moshe, you can see the same thing where God tells Moshe, after the golden calf incident, these people are wicked, I'm going to wipe them out, I'll raise up a new nation from you, and that's it. And what's Moshe say? Yeah, okay, God, you're right. No, Moshe argues with God and says, no, you can't do that. And he pleads for the nation Israel. So when we look at Noah, we look at Avraham, we learn that the highest value for God is not blind obedience. Now, I say this because I think today that's even more relevant. You know, I live in Israel, and around us, unfortunately, the Palestinians have created a death cult where you go on Palestine Media Watch. Don't listen to me, even if you don't know Arabic. Go to Palestine Media Watch, and you will see there how mothers praise the value of jihad, of sending their sons, and in many cases even daughters, to die fighting against the Jews, so that they send a son to blow himself up on a bus filled with Jewish children. That's considered the highest value. You know, a woman that blows herself up and killing dozens of Jews at a Passover celebration or something else will have sporting events named after them and be immortalized in this cult of death. Now, if we compare that, okay, you could look at Avraham. Avraham, who pled for the cities of Sodom and Amorah, when God tells him, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and offer him up as a burnt offering in the place that I will show you, Avraham doesn't resist. He silently takes his son and goes to the place that God shows him, which we know is Mount Moriah, which is the Temple Mount. Chronicles identifies it with the Temple Mount. And there he takes Yitzchak, his son, to offer him up as a burnt offering. And Avraham doesn't even argue. But what happens in the story is Avraham gets ready. And by the way, the son, who's in his 20s, doesn't, resist. He accepts the sacrifice. How can an old man like Avraham bind his son if he doesn't want to be bound? Okay. So Yitzhak accepts. And as Avraham gets ready to sacrifice his son, the angel stays his hand and says, look, I know that you will obey me. I know that you love me wholeheartedly, all of that. But don't sacrifice your son. Look over there. There's a ram caught in the thicket. That's what we're going to sacrifice. So one of the key messages from the Akedah, as we call it in Judaism, the binding of Isaac, is that God does not want human sacrifice. In Canaanite culture, of course, the most precious thing to anybody is our children. And so God might, you're among the Canaanites, God might call you one day to offer your firstborn son, the most important thing you have, as an offering on the altar. And if you're in the Palestinian movement today, God might call you to send your son as a martyr for Allah by blowing himself up on a bus filled with children or attacking Jews with a knife by the side of a highway or something else. And if they are killed, you have paid the highest honor. You've given the most precious thing to Allah, your son or your daughter. But part of the message of Genesis 22 and the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac, is God does not want human sacrifice. He does not want us to offer our sons or daughters even to him. So you have animal sacrifices in Israelite religion take the place of human sacrifice. I want to offer myself up to God in as wholehearted way as I can. I don't offer any human sacrifice, not my son and not my own life. Instead, I offer these animals up as a sacrifice. So what I want to bring out here is that Judaism teaches, of course, we want to obey God. Whenever he gives us a command, we want to obey him. And yet there are limits. God does not want blind obedience to him. And the judge of all the earth would never call for us to do something that he himself forbid, said was wrong. So, now, if you'll notice, in citing these passages, I'm giving examples for peoples of other faiths to see how you can use Jewish texts to help you understand the Hebrew Bible better. And so, reading these texts in a close way, like with a midrash and so on, how that helps us to do a close reading of the biblical text. Now, to really do a close reading of the Hebrew Bible, you need to read it in Hebrew, its original language. Now, to do that, I encourage you to check out my beginning Hebrew courses in ITSL, or the Institute for Torah and the Semitic Languages. You have a link below where you can sign up for my classes. You can also just sign up for my free newsletter and get weekly comments and on things typically dealing with the weekly Torah portion, but could be other topics as well. Thank you very much, and may Hashem richly bless your study of His Torah.